Hello everyone, my name is Ryan. This is lesson 23 of learning HTML and CSS. So I'm going to introduce you to the box model in this lesson. We won't do any coding. We just want to look at this diagram and try and understand what all these elements are. This is one of the most important diagrams to understand when assembling your website. Each item that you place on your website, whether it be an image or a heading or text, can fit into this category of a box. So in the middle dotted area we have our content area, and the content area is basically your image or your text or whatever content you're placing on the page. The content area has both a width and a height. Then there is a border which is optional. In fact, most elements will not have the border on by default, but I'm sure you've come across the border before, especially on images and on columns. So the padding is the space between that content area and the border. If you have a border with no padding, the content will be right next to the border, and that could look quite bad, especially if it's text. If you have text and you have a border around it, you probably want to have some padding so that it looks pleasant to the eye. Then the margin is also similar to padding, but it's on the outside of the border. It's also a spacing, but margin would impact on, let's say you had two images next to each other and you didn't want those images touching each other, you wanted a gap between them. That's where your margin comes in. Margin could also be, let's say you have a main heading on your page, the distance between the heading and the edge of the page would be your margin. Okay, now bear in mind when you set a width and a height on your content area, let's say it's an image. Let's say the image has a width of 200 pixels. If that image also has padding of 20 pixels, there will be 20 pixels all the way around that image, 20 pixels of white space. So in fact, that adds to the total width of the image. So your total width being 200 plus 20 on the left and 20 on the right gives you 240 pixels altogether. So even though the image looks like it's only 200 pixels wide, it's actually taking up 240 pixels of space in terms of width. If we add a border on top of that, let's say of 5 pixels, there's 5 on each side, 5 on the left, 5 on the right. So now we've got 240 in total plus another 10, it's 250 pixels in total. If we then decide to also add a margin to that image so that there's a bit of a gap between that image and the next image, then that needs to also be added to the total amount of space that that image is taking up. And this applies to anything that you place on the page, whether it be a form or a table. Any item whatsoever can have a border, padding and margin, as well as a width and a height. So I hope this helps you understand the box model better. In the next few lessons we'll be looking at each one of these items on an individual basis. That ends our lesson on working with the box model.